Welcome to the Women in Cyber series hosted on CISO Street. I'm Lorene Smith and I'm your host here. And I'm happy to be here today with Jules Okafor, who is the CEO at Revolution Cyber. Welcome, Jules.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so excited today because one of the, you came to CISO Street by reaching out to us through the Contact Us. And, we launched CISO Street in 2020. And, we've been building the community and doing panels and whatnot. And it's so exciting when somebody reaches out to us to say, look, I've got something to talk about and I'd love to be on your program. So, Women in Cyber, it's awesome to have you here. So I'm really excited. We run the series, Women in Cyber, where we do these interviews and publish it for the audience to really learn, about different things. And one of the things that really set apart from from others that I've talked to is your focus on the BISO. And we're gonna find out a little bit about what that is in just a minute. But before we do all that, let's have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got started in this career.
Sure. So I'm the CEO and founder of Revolution Cyber. Revolution Cyber is a security culture as a service firm, one of the only ones that exist today, focused on adapting the security program towards the overall culture of an organization or transforming the way the enterprise views security, either through users, stakeholders, or executive management. Our goal is to define what a security program is and align the way in which it communicates out with the way in which it wants to be perceived and also to change behavior. When I talk about this idea of culture, it ties directly back to my experience. So I am an attorney and I've never practiced. That was a decision I made. But essentially, every day of owning a company, you're a quasi attorney, you're in practice. And so a lot of the work that I do now is in the area of privacy. I work very closely with CISOs and data privacy officers in order to communicate out the kinds of places inside of an organization that they need to be looking for data and security vulnerabilities and violations. But when I went to law school, actually, that wasn't a thing. People were not concerned about security back when I went to law school. Most people were worried about the contracts. And even till today, you'll find the legal team very focused on what the contract says and what it actually does for them in terms of protection. But the reason why the company started is that there needed to be an actionable way by which to mitigate that risk, even if it's legal liability for the organization. And so coupled with my legal experience, I actually have 2 marketing degrees and I have a 20 years history in sales. So former vice president and senior vice president of cybersecurity at Fortress Information Security, former SVP at Habituate, and then also started this company back in 2019.
That's amazing. Is that all?
That is all.
Wow.
Today, that's all today. That's all
today. There's so much more in the future. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't know that you had a law degree. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And deciding not to practice law, that definitely. I actually come across a lot of CISOs in that role who have maybe even practiced a little bit and then switched to come into cybersecurity. So very interesting. So one of the things that you talked about when you reached out to me through CISO Street to, be included in this and featured on it is talking about the importance of a BISO role and what they do as an ambassador of the security team. So talk to us a little bit about what a BISO is and how they act as ambassadors on the security team.
Sure. So the idea of the BISO came about because organizations many years ago started with the role of security awareness person. And the role of the security awareness person is generally just education. They are ensuring that the basic fundamental knowledge an organization and its users need to have is developed across the organization, and people are acting in the ways that the organization needs them to. Many years ago, there was determined to be a gap between what that security awareness manager would know and be able to do given the level that they sat in the organization and what was required by the security team to actually build relationships inside the organization. So a BISO is a person who works alongside the CISO, acting as their ambassador and going out into the organization and really, fulfilling and acting on whatever the the tenets, the standards, and policies are in the security program. They tend to be closer to the business. And so they're translators and diplomats in that they're constantly working between two different groups and translating back and forth for each party for the purpose of making sure that one person understands what the other person needs and they can actively together collaborate and effectively implement a lot of the things that are required for a security program to be successful.
And what does, I would say it, but I'm going to have you say it. What does exactly the BISO stand for, BISO?
Sure. A BISO is a business information security officer.
Okay. And, I don't often hear of BISOs. Before we came on camera, I said, I had met a woman from in an event in Chicago a couple of years ago who was a BISO, and super interesting when I was talking to her. That's why I really loved the fact that you came here to talk about this. But I don't know that many organizations have a BISO. Is that true? And if not, if it is, why? And how can we get more of them?
That's a good question. So many organizations today do not have one. I'm finding that there's a trend in the Fortune 500 to establish BISO programs, to have one senior BISO that then has additional BISOs reporting to them. Part of the challenge with the BISO role is that it is also a political role. This person needs to be good at navigating the politics within the organization. They have to be very fluent and clear in their communication out. They also have to be technical and able to understand cybersecurity in a way that they can actually take the information coming from the threat intel teams, from the security operations teams, and even from security leaders and put it together. First parse it, translate it, put it together, analyze, and then report out. There are a number of soft skills required to do that, which means you're essentially in a BISO looking for a unicorn. That is fundamentally the role. You are a security unicorn.
Okay, I like that image. I'm picturing rainbows and unicorns, and it's awesome.
Yeah, tons of pink and purples. Tons of pink and purples, yes. But what I love is that this role is traditionally set with women. I do know men who are getting into who are in this role. In fact, I know a really good one at Blackbaud. But ultimately, this role is almost set aside for the top leader where there isn't a female inside the security organization.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. I mean, we have such a shortage of women in security. So this is great. I'm really excited to be publishing this on CISO Street to get this information out. But talk a little bit about cyber diplomacy. Sure. And how that role the BISO plays, and just within a cyber risk program. Talk to us about cyber diplomacy.
Sure. So early 2019, I was invited to speak at a conference in Israel, and one of the speakers at the conference was Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu talked about his understanding of where Israel sat with regard to political relationships, and his decision that the government of Israel would fund cybersecurity companies to act as cyber diplomats, creating the relationships that Israel cannot create politically. So they would create security relationships where people would leverage their technology, and they could therefore become closer to organizations and to countries by doing this. When I left Israel and came back, it dawned on me that one of the challenges that security leaders, CISOs, had always had is they're typically not well liked, because what they're coming in immediately to do is say, you've got to change what you're doing now. And most people, most companies don't like change. So this idea of cyber diplomacy says, before you enact major change, before you transform an organization to suit your needs, you have to send out your best people, your most friendly, your most clear communicators. You've got to go out with an open hand, giving first, things that are of benefit to them. And in doing so, they will then turn around and be more diplomatic and establish a relationship with you. So I've actually coined this idea of cyber diplomacy in the context of enterprises, because I believe, quite honestly, the challenge with CISOs today is their ability to communicate, form relationships, and collaborate with other leaders.
That is so true. I actually, I talk to a lot of CISOs every day. And some of the interviews that I've done are all around setting up, what do you do in your first 100 days? Or you're a brand new CISO, first time, what are some good steps to setting up a good program? And always it comes down to a number of things, but relationships, building relationships with the business owners is always on that list.
Always.
It's
And
so
literally,
important.
I call the first 100 days the listening tour. It really, like any new role you do at any executive level, when you see like the major Fortune 500 CEOs step into a new role, they don't start talking first. They literally sit and listen to what already exists. What are things that are people asking for improvements? What are the longstanding problems that haven't been addressed? And then they focus on the quick wins, the things that they can identify as ways to demonstrate that they're here to make change, but it will have immediate impact. So you're listening first, and then you're suggesting second.
Absolutely. Our CEO told me that when I joined the company about 5 years ago, and said the first 3 months, you just sit and listen and go to every single meeting you can of every business or every department. And so you can learn the business, and that's exactly it. Then you can see how you can make impact and make change happen. So that's really important.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about the business of security. You know, it definitely, when it comes down to it, it is all about business, but I like this phrase that you have, the business of security.
So my start in cybersecurity, and I tell the story of having found my first role on Craigslist, which I don't suggest to anybody, don't do that. But back in 2014, I had just been laid off from a job that I'd had for a number of years. I was pregnant with my first child, and I decided that I wanted to move from being in market research to another industry. So cybersecurity offered me the opportunity to take sales, which I'd been in for years, and translate those skills into a new area that was growing. And that's how I got into cybersecurity. I started working for a small MSP in Ashburn, Virginia, which has since now been sold. So it changes. But one thing I noticed when I got into the space was, as much as I was a security person, the amount of studying and research I had to do to be coherent and to be met as someone who was trustworthy and knowledgeable was extensive. I actually had to work with quite a bit of SOC analysts and engineers. They always thought that security was important just because security is important. And as a salesperson, I was very honest, because I said, no, it actually has to solve a problem. And people have a certain amount they're willing to pay to solve this problem. There's always a dollar sign attached to it. So when I talk about this business of security, I mean that we should all be very clear that security in of itself means different things to different people. And there is a limit, a finite amount of money people are willing to spend. It may seem like a company's willing to spend billions, but then they're a $1 trillion company, right? There's a limit to how much people are willing to invest in security. So if we don't align security investments with the revenue of an organization, you're not going to get the budget you want. If you ignore the needs of the salespeople, because sales should be ignored, you're missing out on the people who are the revenue drivers. So you're going to miss what is fundamentally going to be the thing that gets you the thing you want. So security is not just great because we love security. Companies typically don't love security. It causes a lot of problems. But the business side of security is, if we don't do this, we're going to lose this deal. Our customers asking us to upgrade on this side. Compliance requires that we do it. And if we don't do that, there are fines and penalties. There's also liability. All of those things have to do with money. So I want to be clear with people that it is about the business of security that gets CISOs the investment dollars that they want. It is not just that people should do the right thing. Most people won't if they can avoid it.
That's really true. I mean, I just imagine these conversations with the leadership at the company, and it does come down to dollars and cents, right? I mean, you do need to obviously protect your assets and implement a good risk program. But I think, you know, if you can get people more on board if you can have the dollars and cents or the business part of it conversation, and it makes sense. Tell it in their and speak it in their language.
That's exactly.
Get more buy-in. Yeah,
I agree.
So you mentioned the people aspect of it, and as we all know, that the #1 security risk in the world is people, and whether it's intentional or unintentional. So let's talk about managing the human risk as part of, you know, the risk program. Tell us a little bit about that.
I will tell you that it is the least invested in and the most responsible for the breaches. So the way that we approach human risk really is insanity, you know, personified. We're doing the thing over and over again that we know is going to get us the same result, but we can't stop doing it. So human risk is typically the largest part of the attack surface in any organization. The number of people you have increases exponentially the number of ways by which you can be attacked via a system, a device, or some activity or action taken by the human. So when we talk about human risk, it's the ways in which human behavior contribute to a potential compromise, incident, or event. And within organizations, I've always challenged people that assigning one security awareness person or one half resource to taking care of what may be hundreds of thousands of employee risk is not a great way by which to solve the problem. Applying technology alone to solve a human risk is also not sufficient. It has to be a combination of service, process, policy, and technology. And that's how you address human risk over time.
So we have annual training, and we're talking about increasing that to more frequent throughout the year. And the big question is, how frequent should we have it? Is it every 15 minutes a week? Is it once a month? Is it once a quarter? Because obviously we can see and show that when training happens, the awareness goes up. More emails are forwarded to IT saying, this is in question, I don't understand it. Then as time goes by, more people are clicking and ignoring that. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the frequency of the training and how that impacts kind of human behavior.
So it's why I no longer talk about security awareness. I talk about security culture. It actually depends on how your organization runs. When I first built my first program, I was tasked by a shipping company that I could build a security awareness program, but I could not impact employee productivity at all, which is like, do what you need to do, but don't affect our money, right? And I was up for the challenge, and I love challenges like this. What happened is that for this organization, they were a cruise line. So we could help them at the dock. I had to understand where they had these moments where we could interject ourselves. There are moments at the dock where we could stop and help. There are moments at sea when most of the passengers were doing other things. And then there were other parts of timelines in which the ship would not be used and we could go on and implement security. It's the same thing in your organization. We need to understand first, what are the objectives? Two, who are the highest risk people? Because what you can't do is spread security to everyone at the same time. It just doesn't work. So you want to prioritize the people who have the most access to systems, your development teams, IT security teams, executives, and then anybody who really touches those groups. So not like slightly, but they work hand in hand with those groups. Then what you want to do is say to yourself, how much education could we provide that would minimally impact their ability to still do their job? Because the more you distract from people doing their work, the more negative impression they get. So I would say overall, what we found works is no more than about bi-weekly. So every other week is really the most you can kind of infuse security into an organization without disruption. What we found works more than likely, where we can give more information, is on a monthly basis. And monthly, it's in all the different channels. So Slack, Teams, you can do lunch and learns. What you want to do is provide opportunities for people to help themselves, and then promote that they go to the places you want them to help themselves on a routine basis. So you're not constantly creating content. It already exists, but throughout the time you know that it best suits them, you're marketing people, promoting people to go to those places. And that's how I think you should think about it.
Very good. Well, I'm going to pass this along to our CISO and VP of IT who's implementing that. That's great. Let's talk about the security culture. We just talked about a little bit about the training and how important that is. But developing a security culture is obviously a priority and very important. So let's have you talk about that and how you go about scaling that culture.
Sure. So it starts with, so I have a pyramid that we use. So if you're going to scale culture, there are a number of different steps you need to pass through on a pyramid, and it's an inverse pyramid. And so we want to start with the objectives and the vision for the organization. So what is it we want this to look like when we're done? What does success look like for a security program? Then we want to set what the timelines are, what the goals are, the objectives that need to be addressed with the program. Next, capability. So what do we want to address in our program? Who are our audiences? What behaviors do we need them to be able to demonstrate for it to be successful? Next, we move into the initial sort of buy-in. You have to go across the organization, talk to the people who would have an impact on your security program, your security culture. So HR, compliance, legal, IT, security, and then tends to be product development teams, and then also your executives. Those 7 groups tend to have the most impact on your organization, so you've got to get their buy-in. Then you set about looking at what data can I collect that will justify the decisions I'm about to make in the organization? What evidence do I have of the gaps in the organization that I need to fill? And that where the places where the corporate culture is toxic enough that it would impact our ability to succeed. You want to gather that data through feedback, surveys, open opportunities for people to talk. Then you look at your policies and procedures. What policies do we have in place? What policies are missing? How effective have they been in being implemented? Are there ways we can be better about communicating those policies out? Procedures. How do the procedures help and support the policies that we're enacting? Are they aligned, or do they kind of conflict so that people make their own decisions anyway, right? Whenever it gets really difficult to follow a procedure, people just do their own thing just to get the job done. And then we want to move into technology. Technology is after policies and procedures. What you don't want to put into a technology is a bad process. It only makes your job that much worse. And the scalability of your culture across the organization will require the automation of the system on an ongoing basis. You want to, in some ways, be able to set it and forget it. Then you want to talk about end user training. So how do you communicate out? How do you talk to people? Are there opportunities for them to learn and enrich themselves? And how do you create those self-service, I call kiosks, so people can actually help themselves to additional end user training on their own time? And then finally, it's what measure twice, cut once. You want to start measuring the program. Is it working? Where could it be better? What are our OKRs, our KPIs? What are the things that we know that we're doing well? What are the things we know we're not doing so well? And then you want to keep pivoting your program based on the metrics that you're getting. And that system should be able to collect metrics for you across the board.
Very good. Wow, that's great. Great advice. So that's great. We talk about the systems that you need to set up and have in place. So let's talk about why that all underperforms. Why do security programs underperform?
Typically, there's not an investment. So a security program that I've managed takes at least 4 people committed to the awareness program, committed to the culture of the organization. It is a designer, a marketer, a writer, and then it's somebody who's great at presenting the information. So you need at least those 4 resources. Most organizations have 1.5 people dedicated at most. Most organizations have a half person, an analyst at a low level that doesn't even have the authority to make any of the big decisions. The other reason why we see security programs fail is people are relying on the technology to do the job. Technology has rarely ever changed human mindsets, right? I can't point to a time when it literally changed the mindset over time. Social media, people say that to me all the time. Well, what about social media? Social media took a few years, actually, for it to have the impact it's had. It took several years. And it required there be a preponderance of activity for the actual human mindset to change. Then we adapted to it. We also have to do the same in an organization, creating opportunities for people to engage with security, and then the mindset changes. But it can't just be the technology doing the work. And that's a big problem for our industry.
Right. Wow. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about publishing this interview because it's like packed with really good information, and I can see why you're very successful. So that's amazing. So since we're focused in this series on women in cyber, talk a little bit about give some advice to women on getting into the BISO role or just cybersecurity in general. What advice do you have for women?
All right, so I will say this. It will be counterintuitive to what you're told out in the field. The human mind is the next frontier for cybersecurity. So certificates are not the way to do this. In fact, the better you are at demonstrating thought leadership online, volunteering and participating in organizations, and creating a platform for yourself where you integrate topics of technical knowledge, you will be better suited to be a BISO than if you just keep learning the technical stuff and you have your heads down in the book, you're doing learning. You have to demonstrate an ability to share, network, and meet the right people. That will be the best way to get into a BISO role if you're looking to do so. There are a few stepping stones on your way to BISO. You can start in an analyst role, which is you're taking data from different sources, you're analyzing it, and you're reporting it. The ability to do that well is a great skill set to have as a BISO. There's also then security awareness manager. I know many security awareness managers now that have gone to become BISOs. So an awareness leader, you are educating, you are marketing, you're promoting this idea of security. A BISO takes it up in a level because they've got to actually transform and embed security into the broader fabric. So it won't just be your team versus the individual teams. It'll be, how do you get the organization to shift the perception as a whole? And how do you do that through various people? So your security awareness experience will be critical to that because it really is about diplomacy and education. And the last function is GRC. A lot of GRC managers are doing this work now. We're calling them directors of GRC. They are functional BISOs. They're just not called that. So if you are a GSO today, essentially you could create that role for yourself if there isn't one and say, if you have a meeting with your direct report or your boss, you go to her or him and say, you know what? I'm hearing a lot about this idea of a business information security officer. Look online, see what the job description calls for. The things that you meet, tell them I meet them, and then demonstrate to them that you're willing to fill the gaps. I'm willing to, go out and learn how to do PowerPoint decks. I'm willing to present to the board. Those are the things you can talk to them about that you're willing to develop in your role. Every role and every success I've gotten, and I went from in a year, I went from an account manager to the VP of sales. It was only because every time I saw a gap, I stepped in to fill it. So I think there's so much opportunity for women to create the roles of the future. And almost always, the more you can identify and connect with the human, the better you will be and the more job security you'll have over time.
That's really good advice. I have 2 grown daughters who I'm constantly encouraging and, saying, step up, look for those opportunities, don't back down. And you have to be present. You have to insert yourself in as much as you can and look for those opportunities. And when they come, raise your hand. I can do it. Even if you don't know how to do it, you'll figure it out.
I literally my entry into cybersecurity was with no experience, but also you can't be afraid to be called a difficult person, because what I will tell you is that you're being judged on your ability to be difficult against other people. It will require that you also feel comfortable having the difficult conversations to get there. So if you can have the conversation about this new role that doesn't exist and why you're suited for it, you'll become even more qualified to do the job of why security matters in the organization. It actually is a great test. If you can have that conversation, then you can do the role.
That's amazing. Well, I know that your young kids are definitely have somebody to look up to and a great role model. So that's
my
amazing.
my oldest daughter wants to join my company. So that made me really proud. So I'm happy.
That's great. Yeah, my youngest daughter, she did an internship with me at my last job. Yeah. And she and a girlfriend came and worked a couple summers. And even created a PowerPoint presentation that I used on one of my events that I did. So yeah, and you know what? They remember that. She's a mechanical engineer now, so I'm so proud of her. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch the kids grow up and see where they're going to go. So
definitely.
So what do you like to do? I always close our interviews with this question, not related to security or anything like that, but what do you like to do when you're not in your CEO mode?
What I'll say is I've got a passion, and it's why I reached out. I have a passion for helping women avoid some of the turmoil that I went through. I do this on my own time. I do it in my company. I'm constantly looking for people who have a combination of skill sets that make them ideal to get into security, even if we don't know exactly where yet. So I spend a lot of time volunteering in organizations like Women of Cyber Jutsu. I also talk quite a bit to girls in high school and speaking with women in college and mentoring women in cybersecurity who are looking to be promoted. All of this is on my off time. But what I will say is I look to find ways to promote this idea that women, in my opinion, have been better in some ways in cybersecurity than men. How do we get them out there? How do we build that next generation of talent? I was a recruiter many years ago, so I'm really committed to this idea of building the talent pipeline. I do this on and off, work.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I had a business meeting the other evening and met a bunch of people I'd never met before. And this gentleman was sitting next to me at the end of the night, and he said, "So how do you, define success?" And it was just, like, okay. And, really, we talked about a number of things, but one of the things we sort of landed on is, especially when you get later in your career and your life, you really like my measurement of success is how you can help others and live your life with purpose and intention. And when you can, bring my daughters up in the world to respect themselves and take the opportunities and be confident and go out there, it's like when you help others, like you said, it's just so fulfilling.
Yes.
And it brings you, the universe goes to work for you when that happens as well,
And my life is a demonstration of that. What I will say and I say this all the time, I have not till 2 months ago spent a marketing dollar. All of my clients were through word of mouth. And what I did is I started by helping people first. Right. And then the universe found a way to give it back to me without even having me worry about it. My first client was GE. Right? That doesn't happen for a lot of people.
Right.
So what I also say is I define success by how many leaders I've created. I can't be a leader if I haven't created other leaders. And so I'm constantly, and maybe in some ways really compelled, just from being a little kid, I was very compelled to I'm not shy, I'm not afraid. How do I help other people who may be? And then how do I help them to continue to move off into other places? And the more that's happened, they become leaders. And then they say, "Hey, Jules, what can I do for you?" And I'm like, "Hey, as it turns out, so it's good that it pays off, but that's not the payoff for me. It actually is doing the work."
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, this is fantastic. I know the audience is going to love this content, and I'm really excited to publish this on CISO Street. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you reaching out. It's like you said, put yourself out there. Yes. And so anyway, this has been really fun. And with that, we'll conclude the Women in Cyber interview that we did with Jules Okafor. And I'm excited to post this on CISO Street soon. So thank you very much.